your life.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adelina, and I am delighted to welcome you to the very first episode of Life with God. Life with God is a new program that is brought to you by the Adventist Theological Society. And I would be happy to share a few things about the title itself and what we're going to try to achieve in this program, myself and the few individuals who will participate in conversation with me. So, Life with God is a statement, a concept, a phrase, if you want, that is simple and at the same time complex. It is simple because it's a key premise of Christianity. So, as Christians, we believe that life with God is the best life we can live. That sounds like a big statement, but it's true if we do choose to be Christians. In other words, the reason why we make the choice of adopting this religion, this philosophy of life, if you want, Christianity, and incorporate that in our lives is because we believe in some way, at some level at least, that it's worth incorporating in our thinking in our life. But at the same time, it is a complex idea because uh, the width in in this phrase "life with God" implies a relationship, right? And every relationship can be a little complex. At the same time, it's complex because the relationship is between us and God is also complex. And there is so much unknown there about who God is, even for Christians who have maybe studied this for their whole life, or they've been engaged, they have a deep relationship with God. Even for them, it's always a question of unknown and a source of new understanding and deeper understanding. So, the idea of life with God, again, implies a premise that we all of us who will be in this program share, that life with God is the best life we can live. But it also leaves open a question: what does this look like? What does it mean to live a life with God, right? And as we are going to explore that, we're going to look at several characteristics of God. So the main question we're going to ask as we try to unpack this idea of living a life with God is, who is God? And the way we're going to do that is by looking at one concept at a time, one season at a time. In season one, we're going to focus on the concept of love, of God being love and being, in that sense, being a model for us. We're going to look at how God manifests love within the Trinity, within the Godhead. We're going to look at how God manifests his love towards us. We're going to look at um, ways in which we can improve our understanding of love in theory, but also how we can apply that in practice in key relationships and contexts of our lives. We're going to look at healthy patterns of love and unhealthy patterns of love, and how some of us might have acquired those from different factors that influence us, and how we can change for the better and be a better influence in our relationships. We're going to look at the kind of love that is worth accepting. We're going to look at whether there are some aspects of love that are appropriate for God to exhibit, but not for us, and so on and so forth. So many more questions, so many more aspects that our guests and our students are going to bring into the conversation from their own unique perspective and knowledge and life experience. The way we're going to be discussing this concept of love in God is kind of on a journey. You can think of it as a journey. So we want to take you on a journey from understanding some of the factors that have influenced our view of love. In that sense, we're going to look into the history of philosophy, the history of theology, church history, the way philosophers, the way key thinkers in theology and Christianity have understood the love of God. And we're going to look at factors that influence us personally, like community, family patterns, family models, current philosophies, and things like that, just for us to try to get an understanding of what factors might have influenced our own individual way of understanding love. And then we're going to go into scripture. This is going to be the part where experts, theologians, and biblical scholars will take us into the New Testament. They will take us into the Old Testament. And we're also going to try to provide an overall view of the Bible from a more systematic perspective, looking at what the Bible says about God is love. And we're going to let the Bible be a reflective, a corrective mirror to us, if you want. We're going to confront what we learned in the first few episodes about the factors that have influenced our view with what the Bible says about God as love. And I know that, because we're finite beings, our understanding is always limited, but I'm going to trust our genuine desire to learn about God from the scripture. And I trust that because he has chosen to reveal himself to us in this way, that he's willing to help us understand. So he hasn't left us in darkness. He has revealed himself in scripture, and we're willing to look at that and ask for his guidance to help us go as deep as we can in understanding that. Once we have delved a little bit into that, we are going to learn how to apply the new concept, the new understanding of love that we have learned together into key contexts in which we function. These contexts are family and family like structures, community context, our church, our school, our workplace, as well as leadership context. And so, as you can see, we're kind of going from learning some things about our presuppositions to then looking into scripture and trying to have those corrected if necessary. My guess is all of us will experience some change in the process, and then we're going to learn how to apply those in our key relational context. um, I am not going to be alone in this. I'm going to be joined in every session, in every episode, by several individuals. We have a few students joining us in each episode and an expert guest. And if you would like to get to know a little more about the students who will be part of season one, I would like to direct you to our YouTube page, Adventist Theological Society. We have posted there a promo where they introduce themselves a little bit, so you can get to know some things about themselves and how they view God at this point. I'm sure that will become more complex and change a little bit. How they view God, and also what they expect from the program, as well as what they think you might be able to get out of this program yourself. And so I encourage you to go to our YouTube video and get to know a little bit more about them. That is also where you are going to be. We welcome your contribution and your presence in your comments. We invite you to communicate with us during the live stream by inserting your questions and your comments, and we're going to try to incorporate that in the conversation as we go along during the live stream. So please share with us your feedback, your thoughts, your concerns, your questions, and we would love to hear what you're thinking and how you're experiencing the topic and the conversation itself. I would invite you to think of this program as a space where we come together to listen and to understand and to grow together holistically. Now, before I introduce the group that will be joining me tonight, I just want to make I just want to make a confession, if you want, for you, for the audience. I do not know the students, and they do not know me, and they do not know each other very well. I know them a little bit, but they have not been in my classes. We have not been communicating very much, and neither do they know the guest. So I'm sharing this because I wanted to get a picture of who we are and what we're trying to achieve together. And now, what is it that brings us together? We're Christians, we're strangers, each one in their own walks of life, from their own perspective. So what is it that brings us together? What brings us together is a genuine desire to have a conversation on these topics, a genuine desire to know God better, and to engage in open, live, raw, unedited dialogue with each other, in the hope that with our thoughts and with our questions and comments, you will be able to resonate with some of the things we're sharing, and grow with us, and change with us. So let me at this point bring them to you on in the conversation on the screen. We are joined this evening by Mark, Ruth, Nicola, and Hobby. Welcome, guys. Good to see you here. I really look forward to to our conversation tonight. And our special guest this evening is Dr. Oliver Glanz. Dr. Oliver Glanz is Associate Professor of Old Testament at Andrews Theological Seminary. And he's joining us from Andrews, from Berrien Springs, from the seminary, and will be a key person in the conversation, sharing from his expertise, from his knowledge, from his thinking, and from his drawing from his spiritual life and experience with us. Welcome, Dr. Glanz. Thank you for making this happen. I will come back to how today went for you, just to bring that into the talk a little bit, because it's been quite a unique situation today for all of us involved, really. I appreciate that we could make this happen. Now, some of you may know a little bit about Dr. Glanz, but some of you may not know anything about him. And so the students also are just getting acquainted with him. And I would like us to take 5 minutes to get to know as much as we can about him with a speed round of questions. So Oliver, you're under fire for 5 minutes. I'm going to be using this little hourglass here to time us. And you're going to be drilled with questions. We want to get as much as we can about you in 5 minutes.
Sounds good.
All right. Everyone ready? Let's go. Where were you born?
In Korbach, in the very eastern side of Western Germany. So when I looked out of the window, I could look into Eastern Germany, the communist part.
What was your favorite childhood game?
I didn't like games. I was usually cutting wood, figurines, making figurines and stuff like that by myself.
How many siblings do you have?
I had a sister, but she died, unfortunately.
What do you like to do in your spare time?
Mountaineering, probably. Yeah.
What book could... Oh, go ahead.
Besides the Bible, what's your favorite book?
It has the most cursed book has become my most favorite book, probably Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah.
Name one important thing your father taught you.
Optimism.
What would you say to someone just opening the Bible for the first time?
Start with Genesis 1.
What's your favorite Bible character?
Probably Elijah, because he is a strong man at the same time a sissy.
Who or what inspired you to become a biblical scholar?
Nothing. I slipped into it. I didn't choose it.
Title of a painting that really speaks to you.
The Night Watch by Rembrandt.
If you had to write a bumper sticker right now, what would it say?
Ooh, that's a good one. Playing a song with my daughter on the ukulele.
Do you have any pets?
No.
If you could live in any era of history except for the present, where would you live?
In the now.
Well, no, except for the present.
Oh, okay. In the now. I reject the possibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
What design is on your favorite mug?
There's no design on it. It's actually a beer mug from Bavaria without any design. It's more the texture and the materials that make me connected to my roots.
Okay.
What is your most common facial expression?
You have to ask my kids. Probably some sort of crazy.
Perfect.
Where is the most interesting place you've traveled?
The mountains.
If you could time travel, when would you go?
Into the time of my parents and the difficulties that they underwent in the aftermath of the Second World War. That's what I would be interested in.
What was the most difficult part of your whole educational process?
I have a problem. I don't remember bad things really. So I'm serious. So my wife tells that all the time. So I don't. even the bad things or the potentially bad things that might have happened, I enjoy as cool and funny things, like being beaten up by my math teacher. I thought it was in a sense cool. So yeah, I was sent out a couple of times of class. I had to stand in the back of the class for 30 minutes or so. So I'm not the only one. That was just the method back then, and I enjoyed it in a sense. It was kind of thrilling.
How did God come through to you when you were at your lowest?
Um, at the moments where you contemplate intensely suicide.
What is your favorite Sabbath memory?
My favorite Sabbath memory, it's probably a Friday evening as the Sabbath has started already at the deathbed of my grandma, when I held her hands and she slipped into death.
Our time is
Oh,
up. Unfortunately, that went by pretty fast. But Oliver, we got to know quite a few things about you, and I wish we had some time, honestly, to unpack. Maybe some of these aspects that you shared could come back in the conversation. Some of the meaningful experiences you have had with your key relationships, family, and so on and so forth. I would. There is one question that I want to add, and this is a little bit spontaneous because it just happened. So, Oliver, I know you made an effort to be with us tonight, a huge effort, actually. How was your day, and how is your day going?
Well, the day is depending on the perspective you take, but I usually like to. One skill that I learned from my father is being optimistic or being positive against all odds, and so in that sense, this day went well, went okay. But it didn't follow the normal procedures, the normal protocols. So my wife had severe stomach ache and then abdominal pain, and needed to get hospitalized. So we were at the ER from 8 o'clock till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, going through all kinds of medical procedures and stuff like that. And then she underwent an operation, a surgery. Everything is okay, went well. So we thank God for that. But yeah, that was kind of the roller coaster, as we also have two kids. They need to get managed. They need to get up to date on what has happened. They also need to emotionally prepare for all possible outcomes. And so that's kind of what has happened. And after this meeting, after this conversation that we're having with each other, I'll have to rush to the hospital and pick Karen up. So I got a good note from the surgeon. He told me that the surgery went well, and he's expecting that Karen should be good in about 2-3 weeks again.
I'm glad to hear of the good news. I was waiting for them, expecting them. Karen is a wonderful, wonderful lady that I'm happy to know a little bit. And so it was a bit of a difficult day for the family, and we have been praying, and I'm glad to hear that things are moving in the right direction. We appreciate your effort to be with us tonight, and I'm also curious how that's going to shape the conversation a little bit, because every time we come into a dialogue, we come in that dialogue in the moment, and the moment changes with it changes constantly, right? We're in constant flux. So just to open the conversation, I guess the one thing that we're going to discuss tonight mainly is the broad topic of life, because we're just opening this program, and I think it would be fun to have a short conversation on life, on the meaning of life. What does it mean for us to be living beings? What are some of the key aspects that connect us with each other and with God? And then we'll transition a little bit into discussing the concept of love, which we will unpack over the next 11 episodes at this point. So, Oliver, this is something you've pondered throughout your life. It's a topic of interest for you. What can you share with us as a starting point about the meaning of life?
Yeah, I think I would ask the question back in a sense. Why do you ask that question? So why do people ask that question? Why do modern people or postmodern people or people of the 21st century ask that question? I think it is diagnostic in nature. It's symptomatic in nature, because if you would ask that question to my children, they wouldn't know what to answer to that question, and they wouldn't actually understand the question. And so the fact that we ask this question and that we seem to understand what we are asking tells us something about the situation we find ourselves in, or the interpretation that we have put onto our life, namely that there is a lack of meaning. When you experience meaning, you're not aware of meaning. So, but if you experience the lack of meaning, then you become aware. It's like a pain, like my wife. She had this terrible stomach ache. So at that moment, you realize that there is actually the possibility to not have pain. And then once that pain is gone and perhaps something else of your body is hurting, you're not thankful for the fact that you're actually not having pain anymore in the stomach. You just forget about it. So the fact that people ask that question tells you that there is an experience of meaninglessness. If people don't ask that question, it's a blessing. They obviously are embedded in an experience of goodness and meaning. Yeah. So why are you asking the question? Let's put it that way. What's the function of the question?
That's a good question. I think my experience is, well, maybe that's just my personality, that I like to know why I'm alive. I like to have a purpose. I like to know that there is a reason why I exist, and that there is a reason that guides my my choices, my direction, if you want. I would feel completely lost if I don't know where I'm going, where I'm coming from, where I'm going, and why I'm here. And for me, I've had the blessing, I would say, to grow up as a Christian. And so for me personally, that meaning was formed early on, and it has just deepened, and it's very deeply connected with my identity as God's creature. I see myself as a creation of God, and I understand my life to spring from God's existence, which is prior to ours, which gives meaning, therefore, to my existence. But also, the context of sin gives a different purpose to my life, because I was just thinking earlier, actually, about the fact that today was such an interruption. You've dealt with so many interruptions today and changes because of the situation with Karen. And I was thinking of the fact that, from my perspective, our life on this earth during the sinful period of our planet, of our existence, is kind of an interruption in the long scheme of things, because we were not created to be to suffer and to die and to be sinful and to have a short-lived existence, miserable existence. We were created for eternal life, and sin changed that. So in that sense, when we talk about life, for me, there are two aspects of it. One is the life we were meant to have, in which we are going to have again because of Christ, but also this existence currently that we live in a sinful, defective, degenerating world. Two different purposes, I guess. So my purpose for my existence is directly connected also with how to navigate this world of sin and suffering and death and degeneration.
Yeah. No, I'm not negative. I don't have negative feelings towards that question. I mean, they're very biographic questions for myself too. I've struggled with these questions for 10, 15 years myself, and had to find an answer to the self. So I'm highly sympathetic to this question, but it also is, like I said in the beginning, it is a symptomatic question. It is not a question that requires an answer by everybody, because if we need to have an answer to this question, it means that you have a problem. And there might be people, for example, my kids, the example that I gave you earlier, or even myself, when you would have taught me, or when somebody would, the pastor perhaps, or the youth leader or the kindergarten teacher, when he would have taught me what the meaning of life is, I would have forgotten his answer, because I didn't feel the need to, there was no value in the answer. because there was no problem that needed to get fixed. It's only at the moment, I think, where we start to grow up, where we start to break through the protective environments that we hopefully have experienced as children with our parents, that this question is really put onto our table as a task for life, so to say. And unfortunately, many children, many young people are confronted with this question so much earlier because of a tragic experience or for traumatic experiences at home. So to be sympathetic to that question is an important skill that we have to learn if we want to cater to the needs of people. So often it requires from us, if we have had a good upbringing, whether it was religious or not, but if you want to cater to the needs of people, you really need to become sympathetic to the experiences of the dark worlds and the anxieties and the traumata that people undergo, the lack of meaning, the abyss, so to say, of nothingness. If you don't get a sense and understanding of this deep tragedy of nothingness, you are probably not skilled, not equipped to become a blessing to people who are struggling with the meaninglessness of life.
Dr. Glanz?
You can just address me as Oliver. So.
Oh, Oliver, perfect. I agree with you that that's a question we only ask when we're confronted with pain, suffering, confusion. Something about life seems to have a degree of this doesn't seem to have any meaning, and we start to ask that question. But the fact that it's such a universal question, I mean, you can go around the world, and when people experience those things, they have this symptomatic question.
Right.
And I wonder if, even though it's a question that were the world perfect, we wouldn't be asking, I'm wondering if the fact that the question itself is so universal means that there actually is an answer, that we all have this innate sense within us that there is a purpose, there is a meaning, life has some sort of a value. And it's only when we're confronted with something that challenges that assumption that we all have that we try to figure it out. So I'm wondering if, even though the question is symptomatic, we could still try and find an answer.
Absolutely, absolutely. I fully agree with you. It's symptomatic for all ages and all times and everywhere. But there are sometimes peaks of the yelling towards meaning, so to say. And I see this in our modern era much more than, for example, in the generation of my parents or my grandparents, who have experienced much more tragic times than we could even imagine. So my grandfather, he was born 1899, so he experienced the First and Second World War, and he has been imprisoned in Japanese concentration camps, and many of his peers died through cruel procedures that they did on the psyche and on the body, and he never struggled with the question of meaning. So there is something that has changed, I think, in the modern era that makes us have an easier life and still struggle with that question even more. And I think that's what I try to point out. So I'm not saying that it's just a modern phenomena, it is deeply a human phenomena, but I think we need to ask, what are the conditions that create that question? Because when we really study those conditions, we, I think, get connected much deeper to humanity, to life as such, and our meanings become less superficial. They become also less complete, because suffering is so broad, so comprehensive, that we cannot claim that our answer is comprehensive. We can address and take the question serious by giving partial answers that help each other to take the next step. And I think that's something we need to take into consideration when we explore the question of meaning. Perhaps just one more thought. Obviously, as you have pointed out, it's a universal question, and many, if not most, human beings have asked that question. I like, from a biblical perspective, I like to how do you say, locate that question in the psyche of a slave. It's the question of a slave. It's the question of an oppressed person. It's a question who is born by a person who is prohibited to access the joys of life. And this is very clear when you read for example, the creation account, Genesis 1 and 2. It addresses the condition of a person who is suppressed by the pharaohs of this time. So it's a question that needs to be answered because it's a question of slaves. The answer to the question of meaning, interestingly, in Genesis 1 and 2, is an answer that is only satisfactory for the oppressed. It's not satisfactory to the pharaohs, to those who have the power and rule. So we probably go into some details of these texts to explore this more. But obviously, I think that the biblical text very clearly realizes or shows us a God who realizes this question needs to be addressed. And when you address that question, you automatically become sympathetic to the slaves, because the slave is bringing birth to this type of question. Yeah, Nicholas.
In that case, so obviously then the state of being oppressed doesn't necessarily equate with going through tragedy or suffering, because as you pointed out, your parents and grandparents' generations experienced world wars and holocausts and concentration camps, and yet for some reason they didn't wrestle with this question seemingly as much as we might nowadays. So I guess I'm trying to understand, what is it that oppresses us as a society?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think you need a multitude of disciplines to address this question. You need sociology, you need psychology, you need philosophy, you need political science to understand what brings it to the fore. But let me try to to cut some avenues into this territory. From a psychological as well as a sociological perspective, the quest for meaning is not born by the threat of death. So when you look at the most happy societies, you have these surveys that are done regularly where they try to identify which are the most happy societies, and it's regularly the Scandinavian countries. So it's the Netherlands, it's Denmark, it's Sweden, it's Finland. They are always kind of on the highest ranks throughout. I don't know the statistics now exactly, but definitely the last 5 to 10 years, it's always been these countries. Now, these countries are also those countries who advocate for self-chosen death. I'm not sure whether this is the technical term they use, and there is, for example, now with the COVID crisis that we're undergoing, it's interesting that in the Netherlands and in Sweden and in I think the same is in Denmark, there's a very different policy towards health. If you are 70 or older, 75 or older, I forgot the exact benchmark, the hospital's actually not treating you anymore to overcome death or to extend your life. They basically treat you to enter death in a peaceful way, and this is a societal agreement that this is fair and this is good. So the resources of health should be provided to the young people. So obviously death is not so much of a risk. There have been a couple of movies now, a risk to the sense of meaning. I mean, so if it's not death that destroys the sense of a meaningful life, what then is it? That's kind of the question. And one of the dominant answers that also the Bible taps into would be its loneliness. Much more of a risk, perhaps the greatest risk to meaning is loneliness. The antithesis to meaning is loneliness. It's not death. Death, in a sense, is just the materialized version of loneliness, you could say. So, but for example, many old people, and I'm sure some of you, I know you study theology, so and you will cater old people. You will accompany them through their last breathing moments until they slip away into their rest. Many of them are not afraid of death. So many of them are actually longing to die. They're not angry about death. They're not angry about God. For example, my grandma, one of her biggest wishes in the last 2 or 3 years of her life was to finally be able to die. She was praying to God that she finally could die. If I would ask my grandma, what's the meaning of life? She wouldn't be able to answer the question because it was not her question. for her, it was clear life is meaningful and death is not an end to meaning. So obviously for her, it was clear that her life was rich, was meaningful. I mean, speaking now from the outside perspective, because she was not lonely. She had a good family. She had a good relationship to her husband who died 10 years earlier. She knew that her daughters and sons love her. She knew that I would be with her. The fact to be with somebody takes away the angst of meaninglessness. It almost is it's a magic moment. So in to be in the presence of somebody else takes already away much of the abyss of nothingness. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question, but I wanted to affirm that just recently, my grandfather passed away, and we were all by his side. It was on Sabbath as well, so it was very meaningful. But it was interesting because the conversation that happened afterward, it was I resonate with what you're saying about loneliness, because the thing that came out through all the family that was there was not, we don't want to die, but we would, when it comes, we want it to be all together like this. This is the greatest thing, is if it cannot be alone, which I know is a difficult thing at this time. But it was just fascinating because I thought in preparation for that experience that would be my reaction, like, oh, I don't want this to happen to me ever. But like you said, like my grandfather, he lived through wars, and faith was never really a question for him in a very real sense. It was very present. And so his wish, even when he was still very cognizant, was to just be at home together. And I think that's something that comes up quite a bit, is that loneliness factor is really kind of the crux of the issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was just wondering then if loneliness is a problem, and I think you've highlighted that very, very clearly for us. I have to say, for me, this is a new idea. I don't think I've thought of it in these terms, and I have to ask myself why. But that's a personal quest for later on. But if loneliness is a problem, then the solution seems to be the opposite of that, right? So can we? I don't know if we are ready to shift gears, but I'm really interested to see. Ruth had a comment, but I'm really interested to try to evolve this conversation into understanding where to go from here. But we can also delve more into Ruth.
Sure.
I think I can help with that transition. So my question is, if loneliness is a kind of like the base thirst for meaning, what does Christianity have to offer that the rest of the world doesn't have? And I think this is a problem that I've been exploring a lot recently. What does Christianity really have to offer to somebody who has found meaning without God?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that you bring out. I think Christians and any ideology out there thinks that it has the answer to the most basic questions. So whether you're a Muslim, or whether you're Buddhist, or even whether you're an atheist, you think you have the answer to the basic questions in life, and that applies to Christians too. I think, and I'm saying that both as a Christian and as a human being who is continuously struggling with the quest for meaning, is that we need to be aware that meaning is bigger than any ideology. So if it's the case that Christianity offers the answer to the quest of meaning, why are so many non-Christians happy? Why are so many agnostic people happy? I think, and I'm speaking now as a Christian, I think meaning is something that is not reserved for the faithful. Meaning is something that is so abundantly available that every human being can tap into it. And it's a sign, so to say, for me, speaking as a Christian, of the grace and mercy of God. So God doesn't hold back his goodness for the ones who signed up to follow him. It's like a good father, and that's something else that we might be able to explore tonight. The image of a father that is portrayed in the Bible is so much different than the image of the pater. If you take the Latin term of the ancient Near Eastern patriarchal society, remember that the Bible speaks into a deeply patriarchal society where the father, the pater, is not the father of kind of the romantic idea of a family, right? You have mommy, daddy, and then 2, 3 kids, and perhaps a dog and a garden and a grass mower or something like that. That's a very young idea. That's probably 100 years old, so if at all. So the whole idea also of romantic love is very young. It's a luxury idea, so to say. My grandpa didn't marry my grandmother because he felt romantic love towards her. No, he chose her because she was the best mate he thought he can make a life with, and he can succeed in life. Doesn't exclude romanticism. But back to the question. Meaning is so much all encompassing that we need to respect that. We should not take meaning away of people who are, and I'm speaking as a Christian, we should not take the meaning of non-Christians away by saying, you haven't found meaning yet. So therefore you first need to realize that you don't have meaning, because then I can give you meaning. So that is not just unethical, it is also in contrast to the very basic of my understanding of the good father figure I'm an Old Testament scholar of the Old Testament world. So when you look at the father figure of patriarchal societies, that father is not the loving person that you as a son or a daughter would relate to. It's basically the manager of a company. So you are not the only son or daughter. There are many sons and daughters. There are many wives also. You're just one of many. And in fact, we know that from patriarchal societies, what the father would do when one of his wives would bring birth to a child, that father, the patriarch, would look at that child and see whether it's deformed or not. And if it's deformed, if it looks like this could bring quality to the company, that could bring quality to the household. And household, again, don't think of familia. Familia in the Latin is the same for those who know Hebrew, of bayit, house. It is not family in our modern sense. Familia is the patriarchy. It's many families together that build often a little clan. And so the patriarch would look at that baby that is just born and decide at the spot whether it's worthy to die, whether it's worthy to live or not, whether it has additional benefits to the patriarchy or not. And often we know that, for example, from Rome, patriarchs would look at the babies if they have some misfunction, or if they think it might not have the potential intellectual abilities, they would just throw it down the Tiber River. So that was just a normal practice accepted by society, by a patriarchal society. So if you look now at the Bible, that father figure is something very, very different. You know, from the Aaronic blessing, it says, lift up your faith, and when you look up on me.
Lord bless you.
Yeah, how does it go in English? The blessing, the Aaronic blessing.
Isn't it?
Shine upon you.
Yeah,
Right,
Lord
and
bless
let
you and keep you, his face shine upon you.
Yes, thank you. I'm German, so these sacred texts I only know in German, and it's difficult to kind of replicate them in English. But make your faith shine upon me. That's the typical situation of a new child being born, and now the patriarch looks down, and if his face does not shine, you're not worth living, and he will put your head on the rock, smash you dig a little hole, and dump you. So now the image of God in the Old Testament is that of a father of kindness who actually is interested in your life, who wants you, who does not seem to make a difference between your physical abilities, your mental abilities. Remember, when he's choosing Israel, he says, not because you are the richest or the most able or the most potent, you're actually the most stupid and unable and so on. You know, all those negative classifications are put on Israel, and says, but nevertheless, my face shines upon you. So it's a very contrasting image, which brings us now back to the question of loneliness. So from I told you the question of meaning is really a question of slaves, of people who experience meaninglessness, suppression of whatever. So when Moses is called to take out those slaves out of Egypt, he's asking, "What's your name? What should I tell them?" And the name that is born really through the Exodus is Yahweh. Some call it Yehovah, or anyways, it's 4 letters, and they basically, all scholarship agrees on that since the last 50 years, means I am there for you. That's the meaning. So the literal translation would be I'm there. But in the context of Exodus 3:12-18, it's clear it means I am there for you. So I'm there for you. This is so much different to the patriarchal image of the father, where you are there for him, where you have a purpose for him. And so when we go into Genesis 1 and 2 and study that, actually, I like to tell my children when they're getting older, your life is meaningless. And I mean it in the positive sense. And it's the same sense of Genesis 1 and 2. Your life does not have to fulfill my purpose. That's slave mentality. That's pharaonic mentality. That's where the meaning of your life is to fulfill my purpose. But from a biblical perspective, the good father says, you don't have to fulfill any purpose of mine. I want you to find your purpose. I want you to find your life. I want you to express your individuality. And in that sense, one could really argue, when you're not able to find yourself, you are not able to find meaning. And when you're not able to find meaning, you ask the question for meaning. And let me say one last thing, and then torpedo me and divert the conversation. The I in Genesis 2 is born in the encounter with the you. Think about Adam. Adam is born. The whole account doesn't use, when he speaks, there is no I. There is no concept of the I for Adam. The concept of the I is born at the moment where Eve encounters him, where he says, "Oh, that is my flesh and my bones." And so the I, the personal pronoun, is born only in the encounter with the other, which brings us back to the essential question of how the Old Testament and the Bible in general explores the essence of meaning. The essence of meaning is when you encounter me, or when I encounter you. It's only in the I-you encounter, and if you trace the history of philosophy, Martin Buber has made that very famous Ich und Du, I and you. It's only in the encounter with a you that you come to an awareness of yourself. Think about your breath, for example. Yesterday, because of my wife not eating anything and having these severe stomach aches, she was speaking to me and it smelled terrible out of her mouth. So she didn't know that. She wasn't aware of herself. So, but because she was encountering a you, an opposite identity, so she was able to come to an awareness of herself. And so the I, the existence, the beauty of the self is encountered only in the you. So loneliness basically makes you unaware of the self. Loneliness, and if you're unaware of the self, you're trapped by an experience of loneliness. Viktor Frankl here once says, only the ill I can see itself. Yeah, so in the encounter of the you don't see a broken self. If the you is good, if the you generates meaning. Anyways, yeah.
I know, Hobby, I know you had a question, so I look forward to that. I have to interject to let us know that we have 10 minutes left. I really cannot believe that. It went by really fast, but it's 7:50 my time. So I would love for you to ask a question or make the comment, and then Oliver, maybe you can follow up on that. And well, we don't have a lot of time, so we might just want to create a summary of what has been discussed here. But Oliver, I think you've definitely shared a lot of new ideas and a new perspective that I think we'll wrestle with definitely beyond the conversation tonight. So, Hobby, go ahead.
Yeah, so 3 things that I'm hearing you say, which really unpacks this theme that we're trying to talk about right now, which is the meaning of life. One thing that I heard, three things that I heard you say, one of them was that only the ill eye can see themselves, meaning that ties back to what we were saying earlier before when we were talking about how it takes that one pivotal need in your life to start questioning what is the meaning of life. And then you also suggested a really big concept that is seen all over the gospel too, a submission of I for the finding of Jesus. And then as a result, I find myself. And so there's so much talk in the New Testament of how you can find yourself in this relationship with Jesus Christ. And you kind of hit the nail when you spoke about how when we are not aware of ourselves, we actually grow to awareness of self, which I think it's something to definitely talk about in the future. But something that I had in mind while we were all speaking was, what is the input and output of meaning? Because if we think about it in terms of society, right? And I've heard this a lot. It's what you put, the effort that you put into something is what you're going to get out. How much meaning you put into a situation is the meaning that you're going to receive. But we're suggesting a concept where there is this guy named Jesus who actually has components of meaning, right? Jesus is the way, truth, and life, as scripture tells us, that if we actually get to know him on life with God, right? Life with Jesus, and that's another concept too, but that we can actually get to know, actually have more meaning without essentially us putting meaning into meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if I understand you correctly, at the moment where we try to define what meaning is, we lose it. So meaning is always bigger than your doctrine about it. So for example, if I'm married, so I don't know about your situation, but the institution of marriage or the ritual, so to say, of a wedding tries to make this very explicit, that marriage, the promise of eternal love, so to say, is not an economic process. It doesn't follow the rules of an economic process. The Bible, and it's not just the Bible, it's also other cultures, and I can give you an example of that, of the Greek culture here in a second if you want. There is a deep human realization, but it needs bravity, or it needs brevity. No, you need to be brave to accept that realization, namely that what you love, or the definition of love, is not identical to the definition of what you like. So often people, guys, find the most beautiful girl that they think they have found and bring it to the altar, right? I mean, if you follow the Christian tradition, but not just the Christian tradition, many other traditions have the same ritual in the end. Namely, once you stand at the altar, you tell the community and yourself and your spouse that you reject every reason that has brought you to the altar. So why did you choose for that for this beautiful girl? Well, because she's beautiful, she's skilled, she's lovely, she smells good, you know, she cooks good, or whether you can do sports with her. It's amazing. So, and now you come to the altar and say, I stay faithful when you lose your beauty. I stay faithful when I cannot play with you anymore. I stay faithful when you lose your brain. I stay faithful when you treat me in a sense. Yeah. So because there's a deep understanding in that ritual that it wants you and me to embody and communicate to the community that love is not what you like. And I give you now a Greek example of this. I love it. Some of you might know the Homeric poems, Odysseus, the Odyssey. You have the Iliad and the Odyssey. And in the Odyssey, Odysseus is trying to come home. After 10 years in the Trojan War and after 10 years on his Odyssey, he finds himself on the island of Calypso. She's a nymphomaniac. A nymph. I'm not sure how you say that in English. Anyways, so she is a goddess. She is the most beautiful woman a man can imagine. Odysseus sleeps with her every night. Has an amazing sexual life on that island. That island is described like the Garden of Eden. There are 4 rivers flowing. There are fruits every season. There's good food. He actually every night he gets a whole spa experience, get massage, gets oiled, and enjoys never-ending love. And each morning, he finds himself on the shore crying. And the question to the reader is, why does he cry if he lives in paradise? He has the most beautiful girl. He has everything a man wants. So why does he cry? And so he says, I want to go home. I want to be with my mom and dad. I rather die and see my wife again, whose beauty has withered, whose intelligence has withered. So, but I rather want to reunite with the promise. So, and so Calypso, the goddess, says, but Odysseus, I could give you immortality. I could give you everlasting youth, and you won't find anywhere a woman as beautiful as me. I satisfy all your needs. And he says, no, I rather choose mortality. I rather go home. And I think this episode clarifies so much in a different way what Christ represents for a Christian. He rather gives his life. He rather gives up divinity. He rather joins the fate of human beings to just be with his people, with his father, again, the father figure, to be with his son and with his daughter is for him more important than what he likes, so to say, than the economical benefits of it, because it doesn't have any economical benefits. So anyways, I think this is a very dominant message in the Bible. What you love is not what you like. And if you don't understand this, then you are not living a meaningful life. You might think so, but when life gets harsh on you, when, like in my case, my wife is actually going to the hospital and she doesn't look as beautiful as she looked 10 years ago. And I also don't look as beautiful as I looked 10 years ago. It's still so much more meaningful to hold on to her, to hold on to that promise, to hold on to those, how do you say, the disabilities that come with it, than to just choose what you like.
Well, I hate to have to be the person to have to say this, but we really only have a couple minutes left. I mean, if it were for me, I would stay another hour and go more deeply into this conversation. But this is, as I mentioned in the introduction, this is a space that we welcome everyone into, and we invite you to take this space with you, to take this conversation with you and make it your own. Bring these questions and this topic into conversation with your family, your friends, your community, and dig into it. So we're not here looking for final answers, because first of all, we're limited. We're finite human beings, and second of all, we don't have the time for that. So we invite you to continue the conversation in your own circles. For the purpose of this particular episode in this conversation, I would like us to, we maybe go a few minutes over time, but that's okay. We're still learning how this works. But I would like us to conclude with just a brief takeaway, try to paint, a concise picture of what has been shared today. What is a takeaway that each one of you can share from this conversation? And Oliver, I have to say that it really was a perspective changing discussion for everyone. So thank you for that. I think it left us with a lot of things to ponder. Takeaways.
I think my takeaway, my takeaway is that it seems that we all have an inherent dosage of meaning within us, that there are a lot of things that we can attempt to use or to discover in order to satisfy this. But I think the discovery process, in the process of discovering this, we can find out that none of these other things, quote unquote, can satisfy, but truly the one who has brought a lot of meaning into this world through his sacrifice, like we briefly mentioned, which I think is something that I'm excited to explore in the future.
Definitely. I think my takeaway, it kind of actually goes to a question that Ruth asked, what does Christianity have to offer? And then I'm thinking more for myself as a Christian, what do I have to offer in the midst of all of this? And if loneliness is the thing that drives people to feel that lack of meaning, to be questioning, to, you know, just be having that experience that we've been unpacking today, then I think that the most valuable thing that I could offer, and that Christianity could offer, not to say that other people can't offer this too, but I think that what my main focus should be is not necessarily a doctrinal package, but friendship, love, a place where other people can find that relationship with me. Jesus said, they'll know that you're my disciples because of the way you love each other. And so I think that if loneliness is the thing that is driving people to question if they even have a purpose in life, we need to be the people who are radical in going out there and looking for friends.
Yeah, Nicholas, if I may say just something, I like what you're saying, and it's very biblical in a sense, what you're saying. That the most dominant idea in Old and New Testament, I'm speaking now as an Old Testament guy, is the idea of a covenant. So blessings are secondary, curses are secondary. So primary is the idea of a covenant, of I and then you coming together, ultimately the I of a human being and the you of God. Everything can be sacrificed for that covenant. We should, like you said, we should go out and create covenants with our neighbors, with our friends, with everybody.
I like that, making covenants with people.
Mark and Ruth?
I can go next. I think for me, my takeaway was really, it was like that God is not coming to tell people that the meaning that they found, quote, apart from him is worthless, but to actually reinforce that the meaning that they found isn't actually apart from him, but is from him, and that he has more of it to offer. I think that's just a really kind of mind-blowing picture of God, and just very, very gracious and love-filled, and kind of the kind of thing that's bigger than you thought it was and that you want to learn more about.
I resonate with all of those, and it reminded me of that verse in Matthew when it talks about the sun rises on the good and the unjust and the evil all together. Not just those natural occurrences, but even, like Hobby said, that dose of meaning, which is really incredible to think of, and it changes. And I'm still wrestling with how that affects like evangelism. Then is it really more like a covenant-driven thing, like Nicholas was saying, which is a really neat concept. But the idea that whatever meaning they're getting, like Ruth said, behind that there's something so much more is really, really powerful, and I think has huge impacts on how we share this.
Yeah. So if I might add a takeaway, it's a little song that my daughter was singing when she was, I think, 4 years old or something. You know, when kids are so small and they go to bed, they start singing and making up their own songs. And she was singing on one evening, and we had a baby phone, so you can kind of hear what your kids are singing. So she was singing, God, I love you so much because you made mommy, and God, I love you so much because you made daddy, and God, I love you so much because you made the animals and grandma. And then, you know, she listed the whole thing, and it was a funny melody that she put in there. And then she came to this awkward phrase where she said, God, I love you. Well, God, you didn't do not because of the cars. I said, not because of the cars, because they cannot die. And then what did she mean? So she's thankful for mommy and daddy, but she's not thankful for the cars because they cannot die. And then it clicked in my mind. I'm not sure whether she had a philosophic moment or not, but basically, if you think about it, her conclusion was, the things that cannot break apart, for her, a car cannot break apart in her little mind. A car is like a, you know, iron thing. So things that cannot die, things that cannot break, don't generate meaning. So it's those things that can fall apart. A covenant, for example, a love that can fall apart, a divorce, those things that can break, they have meaning. And so the covenant idea has so much to do with the potential of failure. And I think if we don't celebrate, if we don't acknowledge the freedom of the other to join or to adjourn a covenant, the otherness, if you don't recognize the otherness and allow the otherness to be an other without being a risk to a covenant, so you cannot access meaning if you are controlling love, like a pharaoh. If you are in control of meaning, you have automatically lost it. Meaning cannot be controlled. Meaning can only be provided uncontrolled. So, which is kind of, I think, what Garcia was referring to. Love is more, again, than what you like. If we can take this away and say, I want to invest in things that might lose, things that might break apart, things that might get destroyed, then you're on the right track. Then you're living a life that seeks and pursues covenants, and that won't give up even when God disappears or appears to disappear. Think about the Psalms. You're not there, but I'm still investing into this. So I don't experience your presence, but I'm still investing in this, because this is the only source of meaning, namely the things that can potentially be destroyed.
Well, this was definitely too short time for such a big and good conversation. And again, Oliver, even though we cannot continue at this point, I think you've given us some new perspectives and new ways of understanding the concept, and as it relates to our Christian life, really. I would say for me, a big takeaway was first, the idea that when we see relationships around us, we see God at work in those, whether they're Christians or not. So in any connections that human beings engage in with each other, that's God at work in human life. So for me, this is an invitation to celebrate that in the way they are, just for what they are, even in non-Christian life, right? Because it's part of creaturehood, if you want. And also the picture of the father the picture of God as a father of kindness was very meaningful to me, and the idea of God being the I am here for you. These words, I am here for you, are some of the most meaningful words that I've experienced and that I think human beings can experience. And for me to see that in God, the way you explained that passage, and to see that God is not just is, but is here for us, that's one of the most beautiful pictures of God, and significant in my personal life, and I think for others too. I wish we had more time, but I think it was time very well spent. I appreciate you joining us, Oliver, and sharing. Obviously, after this conversation, I can only say I hope you come back and share some more as time allows. And thank you also to everyone, to the students, for your comments and your questions and your engagement. We will continue the conversation with different guests for the next few episodes. Dr. John Reeve is a professor of church history at Andrews, and he will be joining us on Thursday for our second episode. And we will delve into some philosophical conversation, if you want, on the concept of love specifically, and how God's love has been understood and misunderstood in Christianity, specifically in early Christianity. That is a significant period of time because it's the origin from which we all steal something from, right? So he will confront us with some presuppositions in the section between theology and philosophy, and how the concept of love has been understood and misunderstood at the time. And then we will draw some conclusions for ourselves after that. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Oliver. All the best to Karen. And thanks to all of you. And to those who are watching, we appreciate you being here with us. Please come back, share this with your family and friends, and take the conversation to your own circles and make it your own. I will see you hopefully next time.